My husband told his friends I was too dumb to understand his business meetings and asked me to stay home while he went to sign a deal. But he didn't know I was the investor behind the company. When I walked into the meeting room and sat at the head of the table, his face turned completely white. My name is Natalie Brooks, and I'm 33 years old. People often underestimate me the moment I walk into a room. Maybe it's the way I dress, feminine, a little old school. Or maybe it's because I tend to smile more than I talk. But what most people don't know is that behind the pearls and pink cardigans, there's a brain sharper than any boardroom sword. And it took my husband, Tyler, 7 years of marriage to realize that. But by the time he did, it was already too late. Tyler and I met when I was just starting out in finance. I was working at a boutique investment firm in Boston, and he was this charming, driven guy launching a tech startup. He came in to pitch us for funding, and I'll admit I was smitten from the start. Tall, clean cut, with that classic ambitious glint in his eye. We dated for a year, got married the next, and on the surface, everything seemed perfect. We were the golden couple, power duo. I even paused my career for a while to support his. What he didn't know was that I'd never stopped investing. While Tyler built his company from the ground up, with a lot of late nights, ego, and chest-thumping networking, I quietly started a private investment group with a friend from college. We pooled money from women in finance and tech who were tired of being dismissed in boardrooms and began investing in startups under a discreet umbrella firm named Aurora East Ventures. No names, no faces, just capital and credibility. By the 5th year of our marriage, I'd helped fund over a dozen companies. But Tyler had no idea. The arrogance began slow, subtle. First, it was interrupting me at dinner parties when I offered opinions on venture trends. Then it became excluding me from the important business meetings, telling me to just trust him and focus on things at home. I played along, I smiled. I asked questions, and every time he'd say something like, "Don't worry about it, Nat. You wouldn't get the tech stuff anyway." The final straw came one Thursday night. We were hosting his friends, all startup bros who spoke like Silicon Valley was their personal playground. I was passing around drinks when I heard one of them ask Tyler if I'd be joining him at a big deal signing the next morning. Tyler laughed and said, "Nah, I'm not dragging her into that. She's sweet, but she doesn't really get this world." Then he added, in a tone that made my stomach twist, "Besides, she'd just slow things down." I walked into the kitchen and stood there, frozen. I'd built my life around staying silent when men underestimated me. It always paid off in the long run. But something about hearing my husband reduce me to a clueless housewife made my blood boil. That night, when Tyler kissed me goodbye and told me he'd text me after the deal was signed, I smiled back and said, "Good luck, babe." Then I picked up the phone. I wasn't just any investor in the company Tyler was about to close a deal with. I was the lead investor. Through Aurora East, I'd funded 42% of their last round. I knew everything, every figure, every product update, every executive team member. And what Tyler didn't know was that I had been invited to the very same meeting, not as his wife, but as the boss. So the next morning, while he pulled into the downtown office building in his Tesla, wearing his best watch and slickest smile, I was already upstairs. I sat at the head of the long glass table, flipping through the pitch materials I had personally reviewed 6 weeks ago. My heels were crossed, my hair done up, and I wore a navy blue suit I hadn't touched since I left my firm. The executives nodded at me as they walked in. They knew who I was. They respected me. Then the door opened, and in walked Tyler. He was mid-sentence, talking to someone behind him, when he turned and saw me. I don't think I'll ever forget the way his expression shifted. At first, it was confusion, then recognition, then horror. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. I smiled, calm, confident, and said, "Mr. Brooks, glad you could make it." Tyler blinked, clearly trying to process what was happening. He looked at me, then at the execs, then back at me again. I didn't realize you'd be attending, he said finally, forcing a nervous laugh. I didn't realize you'd be representing a company without knowing who sits at the top of its cap table, I replied, casually flipping a page on the document in front of me. The silence in the room was thick. I could feel his pride shriveling. The CEO of the startup, Greg, gave Tyler a nod, but didn't get up from his seat. Natalie has been a key part of our growth. We wouldn't be here without her. He wasn't saying it to be polite. He meant it. Tyler, in that moment, had gone from the loudest man in the room to completely invisible. We went through the meeting. I asked questions. Smart, detailed ones. I challenged a few projections. I offered alternate strategies. Meanwhile, Tyler kept glancing my way like he was trying to remember who the hell he married. The moment the meeting ended, he followed me out into the hallway. Natalie, he hissed, what the hell is going on? Why didn't you tell me you were involved with this company? I stopped and turned slowly. Why would I tell someone who thinks I'm too dumb to understand tech? He flinched like I'd slapped him. I didn't mean it like that. It was just banter. The guys... I cut him off. You've been dismissing me for years, Tyler. It wasn't just banter. You never once thought I had a brain worth listening to. He ran a hand through his hair. Okay, maybe I underestimated you. But damn, Nat, this feels sneaky. Secret investments? Hidden meetings? I smiled coldly. You know what's sneaky? Telling people your wife isn't smart enough to sit at a table she helped build. He didn't say another word. He just stood there, watching me walk away like he didn't recognize me anymore. That night, he didn't come home. But the real surprise came the following week. A friend of mine from our investment circle called and said she'd seen Tyler at a bar with a woman. Not just any woman. His assistant, the same one he'd always insisted was like a little sister. I stayed calm. I'd suspected it for a while. The way his phone was always face down. The sudden late nights. The extra cologne. He thought I didn't notice, but I had every receipt. Instead of confronting him, I did what any smart investor would do. I began pulling out. Slowly, carefully, and silently, I started divesting our shared accounts, transferring assets, moving funds, everything legal, everything clean. Because Tyler had made a critical mistake, he'd made me invisible in his world, and that gave me the power to move in silence. A month passed. I barely saw him, and when I did, it was awkward and tense. He was clearly spiraling, probably sensing something was off, but too proud to ask. And then came the gala. It was a tech industry event, and Aurora East had a table reserved right up front. I was seated next to board members, founders, and investors from companies we backed. I was in my element, powerful, respected, and very, very visible. Tyler walked in halfway through the night. With her, his assistant. She looked younger, shinier, like the kind of woman who took pride in not asking too many questions. When they got to the bar, I saw him glance toward the front of the room and spot me. Our eyes locked. He froze. Then he noticed the giant screen behind me, flashing sponsor names. Aurora East Ventures. Right under the words, lead benefactor. His jaw tightened. I could see the gears turning. And then, panic. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Aurora East had just acquired a major stake in his company's biggest competitor. A move I greenlit 2 days earlier. Because business isn't personal unless you make it that way. And Tyler? He made it personal. Tyler left the gala early. He didn't even try to speak to me that night. He just stood at the bar long enough for the color to drain from his face, then quietly slipped out the back with his assistant clinging to his arm like a nervous shadow. But I knew him too well. He wouldn't go down without trying to flip the board. The very next morning, I got a call from one of our lawyers. Apparently, Tyler had attempted to call an emergency meeting with the board of the startup he was working with, claimed there were internal conflicts of interest involving investor bias. He was trying to make it seem like my influence on the competitor created a breach of ethics. It was almost laughable. He didn't realize I'd already discussed my position with the board weeks ago. In fact, they had approved it, because while Tyler was playing chess with missing pieces, I was playing 5 boards at once. Still, I let him speak. The board allowed him to make his case, and he went on about betrayal, manipulation, secrecy. I watched him from across the conference room as he painted me out to be some conniving wife who had sabotaged his career for revenge. When he finished, the room fell silent. Then Greg, the CEO, calmly pulled out a stack of emails, printed and highlighted. He read from one of them, an email Tyler had sent to a VC group a week prior, trying to shop around confidential product roadmaps from his own company in exchange for a personal consulting fee. The room froze. He had no idea the VC group was one of our affiliates. That email had been forwarded directly to me the minute it landed, so while he thought he was burying me, he'd been digging his own grave. The board didn't even deliberate. Tyler was asked to resign immediately, and his access was revoked by the end of the day. I watched him gather his things, hands trembling, face hollow. But that wasn't the twist that shook him the most. It came a week later when he got home and found the house half empty. The furniture, gone. The art on the walls, removed. My clothes, shoes, jewelry, not a trace. And on the kitchen counter, under a single lamp, sat an envelope. Inside were divorce papers, along with a full itemized list of everything I'd legally transferred, down to the stocks, retirement funds, and rental properties. The prenup he once insisted I sign back when he was the breadwinner. It didn't cover any of the assets I built during our marriage, because he hadn't contributed to them. I didn't take half. I took what was already mine. That night, he blew up my phone with calls, texts, voicemails saying he was sorry, that he missed me, that he got caught up in business and made mistakes. But what really killed him was when I didn't respond. Not once. He wasn't used to silence from me. He was used to explanations, compromises, softness. He was about to learn that a quiet woman isn't a weak one. And just when he thought it was over, another bomb dropped. One of the companies Aurora East had been secretly negotiating with was a media platform. A young, aggressive startup with dirt on dozens of local tech executives, including Tyler. They reached out asking if we wanted to sponsor a new mini-doc series they were launching, 1 episode per scandal. Guess who was featured in the pilot? Not because I pushed for it, because his own assistant leaked everything. Turns out she found out about a third woman he'd been seeing, a girl from a marketing team overseas. So she flipped. Screenshots, voice notes, bank transfers. She gave the media team every bit of his behind-the-scenes filth. And when the episode aired, it went viral in under 48 hours. Tyler lost every consulting offer lined up. No one wanted to touch him. He didn't just lose his marriage or his job. He lost his reputation. But I wasn't done yet. Because I had one last card to play. A month after the documentary aired, Tyler practically disappeared from public view. He stopped posting on social media, stopped going to events, even deactivated his LinkedIn. The man who once bragged about being the next Elon Musk was now barely a ghost. I thought that was the end of it. I had closed the chapter, moved on, until I got a call from my friend Casey, one of the early co-founders of a promising green tech startup we'd funded through Aurora East. She sounded tense. "You're not going to believe who just applied for a project manager role here," she said. I didn't even need her to say his name. "Tyler." "Yep," she confirmed. "Under a fake name, different last name. But his face? Same. Ego? Same." I sighed. "What did he say when he saw the company was backed by us?" "He said he thought it was a coincidence, swore he needed a fresh start, begged me not to tell you I wasn't angry. Not anymore." I was just, intrigued. So I made a decision. I told Casey to bring him in for an interview. Let him talk. Let him believe, just for a moment, that he had one last shot. The interview was scheduled on a Friday. I made sure to be there, not in the room. No, that would have been too easy. I waited until he'd finished the entire hour, walked out of the glass conference room with some desperate hope in his eyes, and was halfway down the hall. That's when I stepped out of my office and casually walked toward him. His face, when he saw me, panic, pure undiluted panic. "Hi, Tyler," I said softly. "Back on your feet already?" He blinked, lips parting. "Natalie, I raised a hand. "Don't. I'm not here to gloat." He nodded quickly, eager. "I just need one chance. I know I messed up, I do. I've lost everything. But I've changed. I'm ready to work, really work. From the bottom up, if I have to." For a second, I let him believe I was considering it. Then I said, "You're right. You've lost everything. But not because you failed. You lost everything because you disrespected the one person who could have saved you from yourself." His eyes dropped. "I know. I'm sorry. I leaned in, just a little. And I hope you remember that every time you walk into a room and wonder why the doors keep closing, it's not bad luck. It's your legacy." Then I turned and walked away. Casey emailed him the rejection that afternoon. But here's where fate decided to do its thing. Just a few weeks after that, I got an unexpected message from a woman named Alexis. She said she was Tyler's ex-girlfriend before he met me. Apparently, they had dated for years, lived together, almost got married, and then, out of nowhere, he ghosted her, vanished, took half her savings too. She said she saw the documentary and finally got the closure she never thought she'd get. But the real shocker? She was now a successful data scientist. And guess what? One of her projects had just been greenlit by Aurora East through a new partnership we were developing with a research lab. She was joining our team. The same woman Tyler abandoned was about to sit 2 floors above him if he ever managed to land a tech job again. Poetic. But still, I wasn't done writing my ending. Because remember that startup I helped acquire? The competitor to Tyler's old company. They needed someone to lead their West Coast division, a public face, a new leader to drive the vision. I said yes. I took the position, moved to LA, started fresh, in a place where my past didn't define me, but powered me. The first event I hosted there was a Women in Tech Summit. Hundreds of young women with bold ideas, startup dreams, and fire in their bellies. And in my keynote speech, I told them my story. Not the parts with the money or the betrayal, but the part where I stopped being someone's shadow, the part where I became my own power. As I stepped off the stage, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Tyler. All it said was, "I watched your speech. I never knew you were this capable." I stared at the message, smiled, then hit delete. Because I wasn't capable. I was unstoppable. 6 months passed. Life was different. Quiet, but full. I was working more than ever, but it didn't feel like work anymore. It felt like purpose. I'd bought a small beach house just outside Santa Monica. Nothing flashy, just something that belonged entirely to me. A space where I could hear the ocean when I opened the windows. A space no one else had ever polluted with lies or manipulation. One morning, while brewing coffee, I got a letter. Not an email. A literal letter. Thick envelope, expensive paper, no return address. Inside was a wedding invitation. At first I thought it was a mistake, but then I read the names. Tyler James Calloway and Vanessa Brooke Green. Vanessa, his assistant, the one who once clung to his arm like a frightened intern. He was marrying her, but that wasn't the twist. The twist was what was folded inside the invitation. A note, handwritten. "Natalie, I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I wanted you to know I finally understand what I had. And what I ruined. I hope you'll come to the wedding. Maybe for closure. Maybe just so I can apologize properly. Either way, I wanted you to know you were never too dumb. I was just too small to see you clearly. T." I stood there for a moment, stunned. He really believed I'd show up to his wedding. And weirdly, part of me did want to go. Not for closure, not even for him, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't slamming a door, it's walking through it wearing a crown. So, I RSV'd. The wedding was in Napa, fancy vineyard estate, candles in the trees, a string quartet playing soft jazz. He'd clearly spent what little money he had left, trying to make it look high-end. I arrived just before the ceremony. Heads turned as I walked in. I could feel the tension, the whispers, the recognition. Tyler saw me from across the courtyard. His face dropped like a stone in water. Vanessa? She was radiant, nervous, clearly had no idea who I was, until her maid of honor whispered something in her ear, and suddenly her smile turned to panic. I walked straight up to the couple. People froze. And then, with the calmest voice I'd ever mustered, I handed Tyler a small white envelope. He looked at it like it was a bomb. "Don't worry," I said, smiling gently. "It's not a threat. It's a wedding gift." Then I turned and walked away, back to my car, back to my life. But what was in that envelope? A signed release form. See, a week before the wedding, I'd been contacted by a major production company. They wanted to make a limited series based on my story. My company had approved the rights. The deal was massive. They asked if I wanted to use real names. I said yes, but only if I had legal documentation that no one involved would contest the show later. That envelope was Tyler's copy of the release agreement. All he had to do was sign it and let his downfall become entertainment for millions. The show aired 6 months later. It broke streaming records in its first weekend. Tyler became a meme, and I became the executive producer. The girl once told to stay home because she was too dumb to understand business, now owned a seat at every table. But here's the real kicker. The show wasn't called The Husband Who Lied. It was called The Woman Who Listened, because I did listen. To every insult, every condescending sigh, every closed door, and I turned it into fuel. So to every woman out there who's been underestimated, overlooked, or silenced, remember, you don't need to scream to be powerful. You just need to rise so high they can't ignore your silence. Not anymore.